Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Right Side Rising. So today we're with Valerie McDonnell, a New Hampshire state representative, only 21 years old, representing Gen Z Republicans in the state legislature. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, so just to get it started right off, how old were you when you ran for the state legislature?
Well, I was 17, a high school senior when running, and ultimately elected at 18.
Wow, how did you really get into politics and ultimately end up running for office at 17 years old?
Yeah, well, I have always been interested in government since I was probably about your age. And looking around my classroom one day, we're all required to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but sometimes students don't stand or they just move their lips. And I said if they really understood American government and why we live in the greatest country on earth, they would say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I wanted to mandate civics courses in New Hampshire schools. That's what ended up happening.
Wow, so how are you pursuing that goal now that you actually are elected?
Sure. So when I first was elected, I was assigned to the education committee on which I still serve, and we get to decide a lot of things, including curriculum. And now it is a half credit of civics is mandated in all New Hampshire middle and high schools
Wow.
students.
That's great. That's great. So, kind of going back to your campaign and how you managed that in high school, can you go a little bit more into how you set up that campaign?
Sure. So I attended my local GOP meeting and then my local town council meeting and all the local meetings I could get involved in. I went for one issue in particular, which was civics, realized, wow, there's a lot of important issues and I want to get involved every way I can. And so I looked up how do I get elected around me? What positions are open? I realized there was a state representative seat in an election coming up. And so I just put my name on the ballot and campaigned for 15 months, which is a lot longer than most candidates, but I didn't want to leave anything to chance.
I mean, what kind of strategies did you pursue over that campaign?
My goal was to make as many voter contacts as possible, and that meant going door to door, really doing that legwork. And whenever there was a local event, even if it was a little outside of my district, I would do what I could to go and to become a speaker at that event. And if you put a microphone in my hand, I think I can win over the audience. And to the best of my ability, I did so and ended up working out.
Yeah. So ever since running for and obviously being elected to the state legislator, has there been any more like doors that have opened for you? Obviously, being so young, because when you're so young, you're kind of like the new guy on the block. Have any doors opened up since actually being elected?
Yeah, I've learned a lot more from my older colleagues, and I never wanted it to seem like I was trying to push them out. I think young people have a place, but some of our older colleagues do as well. Learning from them has been instrumental. I learned a lot about the law enough that I know now I want to practice law. And so I'm currently attending law school, which I would say is the biggest opportunity. Another is I've had young people reach out to me over social media or my email saying, how do they do the same thing in their community? And so I joined with Run Gen Z, which is an organization which connects young conservatives across the country who are looking to run for office with people such as myself who have been in their shoes. And it's a mentorship program. And I would say that's probably my second biggest opportunity from this.
Yeah, so obviously you have a lot of older colleagues when getting into politics, especially when you're Gen Z. I mean, obviously you're really young, but how has being a Gen Z state representative changed your perception of politics?
I would say that people have this idea that it's very divisive, and I'm sure you know with some of the guests you've had, it could be. It really can be. But if you're willing to have those conversations, even across the aisle, I have Democrat colleagues who, although we vote very differently, I wouldn't swap my voting record with theirs. They're level headed people and can have conversations. At least a good portion of them are.
Yeah, so how can we really translate that into encouraging more open dialogue and debate with people who may have different political views than us?
Sure. I would steal a line from the Democrat playbook. They always say, educate yourselves. And although they mean it in a mocking way, if you learn as much as you can about the issues, then be like Charlie Kirk, have those debates, say, prove me wrong. I'm here to talk. I'm not here for violence. I'm not here to argue, just here to have a conversation.
Yeah. So for some young people who feel really disconnected from politics and, possibly misrepresented, what what would your advice be to them?
I would reach out to those in your community who are in the position that you'd like to be. If you'd like to be a state representative, reach out to someone like myself or whoever in your local community. And I'm sure you're 15, you're probably still in school. If your peers see you doing this, it inspires them as well. So even if it's not an elected position, just someone who has a platform, they had to work to get there. Ask them how they did it.
Yeah. So during your tenure at the state legislator, how have you worked to ensure that Gen Z is being represented to the best of your ability?
Yeah, my passion is really education reform. And so I sponsored a bill that made school choice universal for all K through 12 students across New Hampshire. And the majority of students, including myself, will be in a public school setting. But that doesn't mean that's right for everyone. So I want to empower parents and families to choose homeschool or even private options or religious options if that's possible. And that's really what
Y-
this bill did.
Yeah. So obviously, the local offices like state representative are a little more underappreciated or underrecognized. How much power do you think state legislator holds like compared to Congress? Do you think it's like maybe like half of that or
I would say we probably have more of an impact because we're not focused on making headlines. We're focused on getting the job done. And it's a local connection. So I meet people day to day that I represent, where I'm sure congressperson has more constituents. They can't realistically do the same thing. And I'm sure some of them don't even try, right? It's my job to meet whoever I can and to get more done locally. It's, again, not about chasing those headlines.
yeah, yeah. So obviously, during your time as a state representative, what is a vote or a bill that you've, really put a lot of thought into that you believe will have the longest impact on your local district?
Well, I think when it comes to education, that school choice bill, we've already seen those impacts. Looking forward to the next year in the legislature, I'm a co sponsor of a campus carry bill. And it simply recognizes that if you're in the ages of 18 to 22, you're attending a college in New Hampshire, you do have the right to bear arms and protect yourself. We don't want students to be sitting ducks waiting for another tragedy like we saw at Brown University. This can't happen again. It's already too close to New Hampshire, too close to my home. And I think students, well, I know students have the right to bear arms and defend themselves.
Yeah. So obviously, with this education environment that liberal colleges and universities have fostered, do you think that has actually kind of undermined the constitutional ability to carry?
I don't think anything can undermine the ability. It's simply, do these administrators who we all know tend to be on the left, do they recognize that God given right? Because that's really what it is, right? We wrote that down in the Constitution, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, so many years ago. It's still true today because it's given by God.
Yeah. Okay, so on the topic of education, so education policy is often decided by local governments. How do you think that parents and students can continue to get involved with deciding the actual education policy of their area without going to Congress or, just making social media videos? How do you think they can really make that impact through the local government?
So we are required to have our meetings public. Everything I do is live streamed. I'm always sharing the link on social media. And if they're able, they can come in person as well and tell my colleagues exactly how you feel, the changes you like to see. And we sit there and listen, even if we've heard the same thing a million times, even if we're there all day, we listen to every single person. Send me an email, send me a phone call. That's probably the simplest way. Or we always see the parents testify at school board meetings. That I think is effective as well.
Yeah. So how do you balance protecting free speech for students and families while maintaining order in school districts?
Sure. When we look at that in New Hampshire, there's a important time, place, and manner restrictions. So, a school to allow a robust classroom discussion should allow free speech, but they can recognize that limits on that speech might be necessary to have the college serve the function, right? As long as it's not so restrictive, saying like a free speech zone, you only can have free speech in the back corner of the parking lot, for example, but nowhere else on campus. We can recognize that there's wrong. So I can see it being a fine line, but typically the law recognizes those time, place, and manner restrictions if they're not restricting the content of the speech, right? A liberal speaker and a conservative speaker fall under the same restrictions. It's not based on what they're saying, just where or how they're saying it.
Okay. So taking a little turn, what's one issue where you have disagreed politically with leadership in your own party and why?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say on a national level, when we see the Epstein files, I cannot go really a day without thinking, why aren't these files released? If they even exist, because now they're saying that they never existed, right? And I think it's just crazy to say. It's sickening.
Yeah. So kind of on the topic of the balance of power, what is the relationship between you as a local representative to the federal level?
Yeah, New Hampshire's an interesting state. On the local and state level, we have a Republican majority, Republican governor, state and houses, right? We do not have a Republican elected to Congress in most of New England. There's one up in Maine at the moment, but it's the liberal Northeast, or so it appears to outsiders. So there's a huge power play. And I personally, and as I've heard from my constituents as well, feel like I really don't have a connection with my congresswoman, right? We don't see her. She doesn't talk to us. She really doesn't value our opinion. And I'd like to think that if we had a Republican there, that I would have more of that connection. Right now, it's really non existent.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's a shame. How do you think that disconnect is hurting your legislative agenda and kind of getting things done?
Yeah, I know my congresswoman, her priorities are very different from mine in that in the Republican controlled state legislature, she was making a social media video about how the military was terrible and should disobey orders, right? And this Congresswoman Goodlander, if you're wondering, and it was just what did that have to do with providing for the people of New Hampshire, right? When we have housing issues or opioid issues and you're focused on a social media post, just such a disconnect.
Yeah. So obviously you're Gen Z, you're
Yes.
young, and you probably have a lot of friends and family who uses social media. How do you really stay grounded in your policy and your agenda while kind of tuning out, but also hearing what people your age have to say on social media?
I think that's a tough question, especially since being my age, I fall into the on my phone, probably more than I should, just like everyone else. But if I recognize and I try to remind myself, social media is a tool, it serves a means to an end to get a message out and to learn. But if you let it become more than that, if you let it control your life, as we all have from time to time, that's when you see some problems.
Yeah. So I've seen a video of your speech at a Trump rally in New Hampshire. Tell me a little bit more about how you got up on stage to such a big event.
That's one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. One of the best experiences was meeting the president on a couple of times. New Hampshire is the first in the nation primary state, so we see all of those candidates come. And I was elected in 22, and then 2024, I shared a ballot with the president, and I still can't believe that myself. So he was invited to the state, and he was asking for legislative endorsements. I signed up to endorse, of course, and then I received a phone call saying later today, some special guest will be here because they can't say too much for security purposes, but you can kind of imply. And I said, if you show up, you can get a picture. And they said, oh, while you're here, next week we're going to hold a rally. Do you want to speak at it? To show the young support, young female support. And I said, sure, I will. And it was just the largest crowd I've ever spoken at, for sure. It really is true what he says. He has lines out the door, and people don't believe it, but I witnessed that. He does have lines out the door.
Wow, yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I've been to a few of his events just in general, and the lines are out. They're crazy. They're crazy. So, what advice would you give to a 16 or 17-year-old who wants to run for political office like yourself?
Sure, I would say you're not too young. You're not too stupid. There's people that would tell you that too, probably in nicer terms. But learn as much as you can, talk to as many people as you can, believe in yourself because if you're afraid to put yourself out there, no one else is going to trust you either. So, certainly just go for it if you can. Reach out to organizations like Run Gen Z, and you might be connected with me, and I could help you as well. But certainly do what you can and find other people who are willing to help you because there's more people than you'd think.
Yeah. So obviously, you being so young, 17 years old, you running and being one of the, I guess, only Gen Z legislators in your state, essentially. What was that like? Did you feel like an outcast, or I mean, how was that just being like one of the only 18-year-olds in elected office?
Yeah, so my state media put me on the news for that. I'm like, wow, this is so uncommon to be on the news. That seemed a little crazy. But I went in there and everybody already knew who I was because of that, which I think was to my advantage, right? There were some things that were probably more difficult because of my age, but it was a different experience. There was advantages as well. And I went in as if I had something to prove. And now, a few years later, I think my colleagues respect me and I respect them. We have a working relationship. And I'm proud to say I'm not the only Gen Z Republican legislator. In the 24 cycle, we recruited at least two more who have become good friends as well.
Yeah. So, if young people could change just one thing about state government tomorrow, what should it be?
Well, I like that question. Whew. I would say the divisiveness. We need to listen to each other more. And although we do on a lot of issues, there's a lot that we don't. I think when it comes to the abortion issue, right? That's very divisive. I myself, I'm unapologetically pro life. Whenever I get the chance, it's how I'm going to vote. But it's if I were to share my opinion on that, it's immediately shut down as if I don't care about the mother, I don't care about the families, and of course I do, right? And it just if you'd listen to me, I'd explain that, right? Can we have a conversation? I know it's a cultural shift. It's not as easy as just writing the law. I understand, but let's talk about it. And I think if Gen Z wanted to change anything, it would be to have more open conversations, which again, I think is why so many people were inspired by Charlie Kirk.
Yeah. So, you obviously mentioned a cultural issues. What do you think we should be focusing more on, the cultural war or the political war?
They go hand in hand, for better or for worse, right? We can't fight both. There's without recognizing the other. It's only so much I can do as a legislator if I write a perfect law, but people don't follow it, right? Or if they follow the laws, there's always going to be someone who doesn't, which is why we need the legislature. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah. So, just to wrap it up, what gives you the most hope about this generation, Gen Z?
Yeah. I would say whenever I see kids, and I feel funny saying that, I feel like a kid myself sometimes, but when we have bills and everything I do in education, we're talking about kids, they come to testify. I remember a girl as young as 5, and she was there and she was speaking about what she learned in kindergarten that day. And I said, this is the future, right? How could I not have hope when I look at someone that young?
Yeah. So, Valerie, I just want to thank you again for joining us today on the Right Side Rising show. It was certainly a great interview. I hope to talk to you again soon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Right Side Rising. And go follow Valerie McDonnell. She is on the front line. She is the spearhead of this movement. So, thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you, Valerie, for joining us today.
Thank you, Gino. This is a blast.